Right way. If you do something wrong, if part of your bow drill kit is poorly made, it won't work. Fortunately, it's not that hard to do it right. It's pretty easy to do it right. So, the first thing you want to know is that most of your kit is going to be made from cedar. Okay? And cedar is handy. It's around a lot in Ontario. There's tons of it around here. There's tons of it around where I live. Tons of it around probably where most of you live. There's tons of it where we're going to be camping on the weekend. So cedar is really easy to find. The only exception is there are a couple of parts of it that you would want made of something else. The other thing that you're going to need is some cordage. And if you don't happen to have handy cordage, then you would use your shoelaces. But I'll tell you right now, your shoelaces are probably good for one fire, and then they'll melt. Because the friction that you're using to start the fire is going to heat up your shoelaces. And unless you've got nice thick boot laces, very often they melt very quickly. So it's a good idea always to have some rope handy, like I had in my little fire kit there. Okay, and then I've got some camp suds here. It's nice to have some lubrication for your spindle, right? Makes it work better. But you don't need soap. You can use like sweat from your nose or snot or earwax or something like that. Anything that will make it a little more lubricated. Okay, you just have to be careful because some soaps, like dishwashing liquid, if you use them to lubricate it, they will catch on fire or they'll just burn up, right, in what you're doing. So you want to you got to experiment a little bit. This is one exception here because yucca is a plant that grows abundantly in the Southwest. It grows up here too. People have it in their gardens, and sometimes you'll see it. It's like a plant that kind of looks like aloe vera, but the leaves aren't as fleshy, and they're kind of fibrous. They're thick and they're spiked, almost like, you know what they look like? They look like the top of a pineapple. And out of the middle of it grows this one stalk, straight up like this, with a couple of pods on the top of it. If you see somebody in your neighborhood with one of those, you go and you say, when you're finished with this stalk, can I have it? Right? Because you can make, this is the best wood to make a bow drill fire from for your spindle. It will do it in 20 seconds or less. You can get a fire from this, and we'll show you later on, but it's really good stuff. But normally you would have something like this or like this that you would start with. It is a good idea to have some cedar bark, and we'll show you why later on, because that's where you're going to get your tinder from. It's a good idea to have a little bit of birch bark. That helps a bit too. Okay, and then after that, you need, one more thing you need. You're going to turn this or this into something like this, which is your fireboard. Okay, this is made out of cedar. This is very old, like coming from a cedar fence. But you need one more thing, and that's this. And this can be hardwood if you want. This can be maple or oak or something like that, because this is what goes on top that you hold on to, and you want this to last a long time. You definitely don't want this hole to burn through into your hand. What you need a bow, and we'll talk about bows in a minute. You need a handhold. You need a fireboard, and you need a spindle. I have an assortment of spindles here. Right? This is a very good spindle. Can you zero it? Can you zoom in on that? It has all the qualities of a good spindle. That being, it's around the right length. It can be a little bit longer than this. This one's been worn down a little bit. It is rounded on one side. That's the bottom. and it's pointy on the other side. That's the top. So this goes on top like that, and this goes into the fireboard. Where am I going to put the lubricant? Any ideas? What makes sense for me to put the lubricant? Where do I want friction and where don't I want friction? This lubricant's going to reduce friction.
The round bottom?
No, because if I put, and that's very important, if I put lubricant on the bottom, it's not going to create enough friction in here to get hot, right? I want all the friction down here. That's the whole idea. Friction down here makes heat. On the top, I don't want friction. I want it to be rotating really nicely and easily and quickly. And in fact, sometimes when you do this, you'll see smoke coming from the top, and then you know you're wasting a lot of energy. You could be put some lubricant up here. Now, if that's what I want, what happens if I accidentally do this? Right? I put lubricant on the end that I don't want lubricant on, and you won't get a fire then. You're going to have to get your knife and you're going to have to carve it down and get all the lubricant off the bottom, so you never make that mistake, because it costs you a lot of time, and you can't fix it other than by cutting off the part that you put lubricant on. So lubricant on the top, but never on the bottom. Okay? All right. So how do I make one of these? Oh, the other thing about this I wanted to point out is notice that it's narrower in the middle than it is on the ends. Okay? Why? All right, and I can understand why you might not know. Because it goes on the bow like this. Whoops. It needs to be tight. Right? And it's going to go in here, and I'm going to move the bow back and forth, and when I move it back and forth, it's going to spin the spindle. So by having it narrower in the middle, it prevents the cord from riding up or down the spindle. Right? It helps to keep it in the middle. Now if you don't do it right, it still won't work. It'll still ride up or down, but it helps a lot. Right? And it needs to be this tight. This is pretty tight. And this is how tight it needs to be. And very quickly, I'll show you, just so that you can put it all together in your head. You have this, and then I would normally put my foot up there, but I'm not going to put my foot way up there. And I would move the bow back and forth, and this is going to spin, and it's going to create the friction that I need on the bottom. All right? So if I want to make a board out of this, I can go straight down, as long as I don't have knots. I got one knot here, so it might be a bit of a problem. But I can go straight down, and right beside it I can go straight down again, and it'll come out like a cedar shingle. It'll come out like really, really straight. That's one of the beauties of working with cedar, is that it cuts really nicely. So what we're going to do is I'm going to, what we call baton it. You can use a hatchet like this, or you can use another stick. Okay? So this is batoning, and you would normally do this a little lower, but I just want to have a nice solid thing here. So I'm going to cut down. Okay, and see how nice and flat that is, right, afterwards? So now I'm going to do it again. Nice and flat on both sides. Exactly the kind of thing that you want. Okay? Cut it.
On boot.
On boot. My spindle. There's my second cut. Look at that. Isn't it cut so nicely? There's my spindle. And what I have to do is I need to carve it into one of these. Okay? Thickness of your spindle. Okay? Thickness matters. I would say what you want is you want to end up with a spindle that's somewhere between little finger and thumb. Okay? Somewhere in there. I've seen huge spindles. In fact, I saw one that was like as big as a tree trunk, and took with two people to have it go back and forth. And they got a fire going, but it wasn't really practical. And I've also seen a bow drill kit that fits in a matchbox. Right? It's a kind of a one-shot about drill fire, right? To use it once and it's not going to work anymore if it uses it all. The ideal size is what we're making here. So you would carve it down, and you would try to make it as smooth, right? And we're going to talk about knife safety and how to use your knife properly a little bit later on, but it makes a big difference. And about this length, maybe a little longer. Okay, you want it about finger length or a finger and a half long. Okay, I wouldn't make it much bigger than this, but this is fine. Right, this one needs a little work. It could need a little bit of knife work to smooth it around, but it's got, and it's never been used, so it's got a domed end on one side and a pointy end on the other side. Domed end down, pointy end up. Okay? Make your spindle first. Okay? We're going to use this spindle, and I could easily get this spindle out of this piece of wood. The reason you want to make your spindle first is because when you start working on your board, where'd the board go? There it is. No, there it is. When you start working on your board, you want to have the size of the spindle in mind. So the way that you do it is you figure out, first of all, I would get rid of this stuff here. I want to make sure that it's relatively, this one is nice and flat. It stands, it doesn't wobble very much if I put weight on one side. I'm going to put my first hole somewhere in this area here. And then when that one's used up, I can go over here. When that one's used up, I can go over here and keep moving my way down. I can probably get, I'd say probably 10 holes out of this board. And if it's a good board and it's working well for you, you want to do that. But I want to put the hole in the right place. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the spindle so it is right flush with the edge. I can use my hand to make it right flush with the edge of the board. And then I'm going to move it a quarter of a turn. And wherever the point is there, I'm going to make a mark with my knife. Okay, that's the center of the hole. So if I had a thinner spindle, the hole would be a little closer to the edge, and if I had a thicker one, it would be a little farther away from the edge. And you'll see why that's important in a minute. But that's one of those details that you really have to follow in order for it to work properly. So now that I've got this, I'm going to take my knife. By the way, you could do all of this with a sharp rock. There's not any part of this other than maybe splitting the cedar. There's not any part of it that you couldn't do with a sharp rock. This would easily just with a sharp rock be no problem. All right. Enough of a hole so that when I put this in there, it's not going to easily move out. It's not good enough. I need to make it a little wider.
I can cut some of this out.
Yeah, but that's fine. We'll just show. Okay. Now, once I've got this, a little wider, see, I keep testing it against this, and that's fine now. It fits in there nicely. All right. So, I want to burn in the rest of my hole, because if I do it with the knife, it won't necessarily be the right size. If I do it by burning it in, it'll be exactly the right size. And it works best when your spindle and your hole are matched. It is normal for it to pop out like that. It will pop out on you until you get the feel for it. Once you've got the feel for it, you can make it stay in there because you know how much pressure to give and how much not to give. But it's going to be normal, especially at this stage, because at this stage, the hole isn't big enough, so it keeps slipping out. Now he's not going to do anything about it now, but when you hear it squeaking like that, it's usually because the top needs some lubrication.
Okay. That's burnt in a little bit, but if you want me to keep going.
I want it to be enough so that I can put the notch in.
Okay.
So it should bury, the hole should be big enough to bury the whole head of the spindle, at least. I'm going to make a V going down here, which needs to be about 1/8 of a circle. This, I'm just going to point out from the way of knife safety. I was watching a video on YouTube, and I was seeing the guy who was making a fireboard, and he was doing it like this.
Nice.
Okay, what's the problem with that?
Cut yourself.
Yeah, you slip, you're going to put the knife through your hand. Okay, so there are certain times when this work here, and this also, you can see why you don't want to have a folding knife that doesn't lock open, because if you're doing this and it locks on your fingers, it's going to cut your top of your fingers nice. So you definitely don't want to do this. You want to put it down someplace and do it like this. Similarly with cutting the V. This is something that is, if you're not careful, can cause you some damage. So I'm just gonna use the knife, and I'm going to just It's one of the times when you cut towards yourself and you shouldn't. If you flare out the bottom of the V, okay? So I'm just gonna all right. So now I have the V, and I would look at this here, and I would say to myself, I think I made the hole a little bit too far away from the edge. Okay, which is possible, but we shall see how it works. Then into that goes the spindle, okay, and on top of that goes the handhold. Handhold, like I said, is the one part that you can make out of a hardwood, and what I would usually do is like this one. You just get a round log and split it in half and cut a hole in it like that, and it goes on top there. Yep. Okay, so those are the three parts that are important to that. Then, finally, as I said, you need your bow, and I would look, as I said, for something that is flexible. I would make it about maybe about this long.
Usually arm length, right?
Yeah, arm length or a little bit more, right? So, you know, maybe about that long, right? This long here. But because you're going to hold, you need a handle to hold on to, and you're going to cut a little groove to tie the rope into here, and cut a little groove to tie the rope into here. If not, it's just going to keep coming undone on you. This one's a little smaller. You can see that they cut a little groove in here to put the rope in so it doesn't slide, and the same thing on the bottom. Okay. So now you've got this, put it in here like this. You need to turn it again so that the blunt side is on the bottom and the sharp side is on the top. It goes in, and then you do what Colin was doing on there, which we'll talk more about on the weekend. And you need to put your foot on it so that it doesn't move, and then you start going. And you get, now it's not a matter of strength. Okay? Sometimes it's a matter of endurance. You might get out of breath doing it, but it's not strength. In fact, the responsibility for lighting the fire in the native tribes used to be the youngest girl in the group, not a 2-year-old girl or something like that, but a young girl would be doing it. So it's not a matter of strength. It's a matter of technique. You'll fight with it the first time you do it, and it'll take you a while, and then every time you do it after that, it'll get faster and faster and faster until you get to the point where somebody is nice and gives you a yucca spindle. You can probably do it in about 20 seconds. right? Just sit down, and 20 seconds later you've got a coal. And you got a coal. So what will happen is the black or dark brown powder will accumulate in this V. And we'll talk about technique later on. First you need to get some there, and then you need to pour on the juice and the energy and to get it hot enough to create an actual combustion of that powder into a coal, right? And then you're going to need to have something that you can put that coal into to blow into a flame. And there are several possibilities. One possibility is you take birch bark and you shred it up really, really finely, like I'm talking about spaghetti fine, right? So that's one thing that you can do. Another thing that you can do is you can take this piece of dead cedar bark and you take a rock or anything you've got, you come up with, whoops, right? Everybody see that? And that stuff burns like crazy, and it burns great. Okay, you put say half of that and half scrunched up birch bark, and you put your coal in there and you blow on it, and it will actually go and fire very, very quickly. You know what jute twine is? Buy in a hardware store. It looks like it's a very rough, fibery kind of a twine. And what you do is you take it apart. You separate all the little tiny hair-like fibers, and you make like a little nest out of it. And that works really well as a tinder too. But you're not likely to find twine growing. Jute doesn't grow in Ontario. It grows in the Philippines more. So you would have everything all set, and you would have your spindle in there with the whole thing going, and you would carefully take it out, and in there you would see a little pile of black dust, and it's probably smoking. And if it continues to smoke, even if you can't see it, there's a coal in there. So you just very carefully wave at it with your hands, give it a little bit of oxygen, and that coal will get bigger and bigger. That's why you want to get a little pile of dust in there first, right? Because your coal originally might be like as small as a pinhead, but it will spread throughout all the powder, and you just give it some time, and then you very carefully give it a little tap, make sure there's no wind blowing, lift this up, and you've got your little dust pile with a coal, probably red hot, and then you can take this and you get your tinder bundle and you put it in your tinder bundle. Right? So the tinder bundle isn't part of the bow drill, it's separate.